Hello and welcome to another edition of the Cyclone Insider Show. I am Travis Hines. He is Eugene Rapay. We work for the Des Moines Register, and this is our radio and video show. How's everybody doing? Eugene, how are you?
Always fantastic. How you doing, Travis?
I'm good. We are in the middle of November, which means we are in the middle of everything right now for Iowa State athletics with an interesting wind down for the football season and increasingly interesting wind ups for the men and women's basketball seasons. Football obviously on a bye, but stopped a 4-game losing streak last week. The Iowa State men beat the tar out of Mississippi State on Monday in Sioux Falls. Audi Crooks set a school record for 43 points in a game last night. So there is we got plenty to talk about, my man.
Yeah, good. A lot going on. Good time to be a Cyclone.
Yeah, good time to be in the Cyclone content business, at least. Which
that too.
Business is booming.
Business is booming.
That's what everybody in the newspaper industry is saying. Just ask. Let's talk some football first. It's a bye week for the Cyclones and Matt Campbell, but I do think that they are still the A1 topic here with their win Saturday at TCU. We didn't pod after that game because I had to catch a flight. Shout out to the 9 p.m. American Airlines flight out of Dallas. But I do want to touch on it briefly because I think it's important as we take a step back in this bye week to try to get a handle on where this team is, where this season is. I don't think we need to talk about where this program is because I don't think that's particularly changed from any time at that season. I don't think, like, you look around the country and you see programs in turmoil or programs undergoing change. I don't think that's the situation Iowa State's in at all. I do think it is very interesting, big picture conversations about this team and this season, though. So let me start out by saying, great win for Iowa State. Great to see Ben Bramer on the damn football field. Number one, I think, is the number one thing from last Saturday. Number two for Iowa State, good for them to end the 4-game losing streak, get bowl eligibility. Like we talked about multiple times, Eugene, the worst case scenario for this team, like reasonable worst case scenario, was really bad. Like losing out, ending on a 7-game losing streak, missing out on bowl eligibility, losing to some pretty mediocre or bad teams to get there. That is all gone. Like they took care of that. And I don't think you don't want to just whistle on by that. Like that's important that they were able to get that done. I think the question now is like, is this a different team today than it was a week ago? Is this a different season as it was today as it was a week ago? And I have thoughts, but let's first start with, do you think this is a different team, or do you feel differently about this team in the wake of them, getting that win on Saturday against TCU?
I feel like it's very much a catalyst point, but we'll see how they build off of it, or if it's just more of the same as they were during that losing skid. It was a real gutsy performance to come back down 17-6 early in the fourth quarter and to pull off a win on the backbone of defense, and then Aiden Flores' heroic moment with that punt return touchdown that absolutely made all the difference. But there are still some holes. I do feel slightly better. Like I felt like the defense has started to won me back over with their performances in back-to-back weeks now. They've now forced 6 turnovers. Like that was a key thing that I felt like was missing during that losing streak, or at the peak, or I guess the low of that losing streak. So for them to force 3 turnovers in timely moments against a TCU offense that was averaging more than 34 points per game and holding them to a season low 17, like I feel like that's a good sign. Aiden Flores making a big play on special teams, that was big for him and for the squad. But there are still some question marks on offense. But, they got the win that they needed. And the offense, although how poorly they performed, at least in the passing game, they got the key plays down the stretch to really run the clock out and hold on to that win.
Yeah, I think the defense from coordinator John Haycock all the way down, I think understood the assignment that with the injuries that they have in the secondary, with how the offense is struggling to do much of anything, and Saturday was maybe as bad as it's been, that they had to go do something. Like that sitting, bending, and not breaking wasn't going to cut it. And I think that they understood that they were going to have to go out and make plays, much in the way that we saw Aiden Flora, take that to the house on Saturday. And so I think that's a positive. Like understanding who you are, what you can do, and what you need to do to win football games, I think is underrated, especially when you are not the same defense, you're not the same football team you were a few weeks ago and certainly a few months ago. So I thought, like, I don't know that I feel better about the composition of Iowa State's defense. Like they're still playing a lot of backups, but I feel confident that they know that they have to do things differently and probably take bigger risks to generate the type of production that this team needs. Like, given what we've seen from the Iowa State offense, like if the defense were just to sit back and even just try to hold teams to field goals, that might not be good enough to win because you're not going to hold them to a field goal every time. And Iowa State can't really match field goal for field goal offensively right now. Kyle Conradi does not look like himself, and certainly the offense, even getting into position to kick field goals on Saturday proved difficult. So I think that was the most encouraging thing for me about the defense. But ultimately, like, you win games with players, and as well as they played on Saturday, I'm not going to claim that this defense isn't going to miss a beat without its top two starting corners, without Jamison Patton, without Tayshaun James, without Will McLaughlin now for the year. I don't know that we've heard from Campbell about Patton or even Tayshaun about whether they'll be able to play on the other side of this bye. If they are, then I think, like, again, can you use Saturday as a building block to probably still having the same assignment, still having the same goals, but with better experienced players, with better players, your typical starters. Like, that'll be big. I think, like, the bigger discussion to me is about the quarterback and about the offense. And I didn't get better on Saturday. If anything, like, here's a little bit inside baseball or behind the scenes here. Like, when you have a game like that on Saturday, I have to have a story done immediately, and that means I have to have a story written for when Iowa State wins and if Iowa State loses, ready to go. The Iowa State loses column was about the ineptness of that offense and about a deteriorating performance from Rocco Beck. And when they win that game, that is no longer the number one story coming from the game. So that's not what I wrote, but I still think it's true. Like, that offense they made some plays down the stretch, like you said. They still were not able to run the clock out. They had to punt it back to TCU. But you're still talking about an offense that really struggled to put points on the board, really struggled to move the football, and a quarterback in Rocco Beck. I don't have his lineup here with me, but he didn't have over 100 yards passing until they picked up that critical third down in the fourth quarter, that 15-yard strike. So, like, that is not fixed. And I think that's why I don't really feel much differently about the team, because I do think, like, the problems that we had seen through the 4-game losing streak were still pretty visible on Saturday, albeit in a win. And I think, again, like, I don't want this to come off as like I'm crapping on Iowa State, because they had all those issues and still found a way to win. That is hugely admirable. Aiden Flora, like, that is a play that will live in Iowa State lore. Like, hopefully he doesn't have to, he's probably not 21, so hopefully he doesn't have to buy too many soft drinks wherever he goes around in Ames. But in terms of, like, what this team can do going forward, I still think, like, the problems are still there. The issues to solve are still there.
Yeah, for Rocco Beck, there was a career low 111 passing yards. And like you said, that he didn't even cross the century mark until super late in the game. He was 9 for 24, which is just a touch above he finished 37.5% completion rate, which is just 0.4 above his career low. So he was he was right around there with some of the worst passing performances that he's had in a Cyclone uniform, which is definitely concerning that the passing game hasn't really gotten better. It hasn't really improved. It kind of got worse. So now, just coming out of this bye week, obviously health for him is a factor. To what degree, we won't know because they're not transparent on that front. But maybe will this bye week help him feel better? He's obviously sporting the brace on his left shoulder. Is he going to be in better shape and better form coming out of this bye? Like, that to me is something that I'm most curious about.
And I am sympathetic to the idea, not sympathetic, I'm open to the idea that this is primarily driven by health. Like we saw the hits he took against Arizona, we saw the hits he took against Cincinnati, and we've seen his play steadily deteriorate since then. You mentioned the brace on his left shoulder. Because when we're watching him, like, are you seeing? I mean, I am now seeing a quarterback with confidence issues, I think, like truly, but I'm not seeing him make a ton of bad decisions. Like, I do think like some of his throws are just bad. Like, they're just off the mark. He's getting zero help from his wide receivers. Like the drop that Sewell had, Carson Brown had a drop on Saturday. The receivers have to help him out, or at minimum, don't make it worse, right? Like, catch the ball. You just have to. If you don't do that, like that, I think is again a big part of the issue here, is that there's not a whole lot of trust. It would appear on the surface from an observation or from an observer standpoint that there's a lot of trust between Rocco Becht and those wide receivers for good reason. He can't really trust them to catch it, and I don't think either of them trust each other to know what the other one is going to do, because we've seen the receivers run their own routes, and then I think in the last couple of weeks we've seen where it looks like Rocco made the wrong read. I think back to what was the interception he had when he threw it? It was at BYU, where just threw it to the other team when Sewell, even if he would have kept running that route, would have ran into two defenders. So there was some sort of disconnect there. And maybe it's injury related, like Matt and Rocco aren't saying, but certainly not the same player that we've seen for literally years for Iowa State. And it was getting to the point Saturday where I've written it, I've said it, I did not think a quarterback change would have been a necessary or wise thing for Iowa State to do. But watching that unfold on Saturday, you have to soften that position because Rocco just wasn't very good. He wasn't very effective and he wasn't productive. And now you've seen like really two bad performances in a row. The previous three, I don't think they were there, but like things got, what would you say was 9 of 24?
9 of 24
for 111 yards. Like that, really hard to win Big 12 football games. I mean, if you're TCU coming out of that game, you have to just be pulling your hair out how to not win that game. Yeah. Like, again, credit to Iowa State, but when you look at and maybe none of this matters because they're playing a mediocre Kansas team and an awful Oklahoma State team, and then you get to the bowl season and who the hell knows who's anybody's going to have between the transfer portal and opt-outs. But yeah, it's weird to see a good quarterback who, like, people around these parts wanted him to be on Heisman lists like 6 weeks ago, to now not even being able to have like within shouting distance of a 50% completion percentage.
No, and you brought up a good point earlier. Like, you can see the vision or what he was trying to do or the intent on some of these throws, but he just doesn't have the same precision or the same touch on his passes that he had in those first 5 games. It felt like there were a bunch of dimes that honestly Rocco threw in that 5-0 start. And now here it's like he's missing wide open guys, or he's throwing behind them, or he's airmailing it above them. Like, just doesn't have that same precision, doesn't seem like himself. But you could see what he was trying to do. It just wasn't getting the ball where it needed to be. And then you have the moments where the ball is exactly where it needs to be. It's right at the numbers, right at the hands, and then it gets dropped or it doesn't get reeled in. And then that's also got to be frustrating as well.
I mean, I can vividly think back to the BYU game. You and I are sitting next to each other, and I looked at you and go, man, Rocco is throwing dimes today. Like, he is looking good. And then, so maybe it's all my fault. A second later, he threw that first pick, first of 3 interceptions, and it's really kind of been all downhill from there, really. Like, that's where I start to trace where this went from like this to nosediving into production. And again, we talked about it last week. I wrote about it, that like making a quarterback change here is super tricky because in any other situation, if we were viewing this from afar, you'd say, okay, then that quarterback's immediately in the transfer portal. If he is as hurt as I'm beginning to believe that he might be, you have a pretty good reason of sitting him down there to where it's not a voted no confidence. It's not a Rocco's not our guy. It's not that we have an open competition. It's this dude is hurt and he's not helping himself and he's not helping the team right now. And maybe that's what the bye week is for. But man, like, that was tough to watch. And eventually, like, even if they win, like, do you think Rocco Becht feels good about the way he played, even though they won? Probably not. I wouldn't think so. Like, he probably feels good about that 3rd and 6, 15-yard completion, like, to try to win the game. But, like, to me, like, sometimes the stats do not align with what you see in a football game, good and bad. The last 2 weeks for Rocco, the bad stat lines have lined up exactly with what you've seen over 60 minutes of football. Is bad quarterback play, ineffective quarterback play.
Yeah. And can you imagine?
Go ahead.
Can you imagine if the run game wasn't as productive as it has been over the last month? Like, what this offense could look like if it at least didn't have 100-yard rushers, 150-yard rushers. It could be way worse.
Well, and then again, I think it's easy to also throw this back at Campbell and Mauser too. Like, why aren't they running the ball more? Like, take some pressure off Rocco. Not to mention, like, that's been the more effective phase of your offense the last couple of weeks, and it's not fluky because it's been sustained, and it's been 2 different running backs. Like, you go back to, what did Abu have at Colorado? 177.
Yeah,
I mean, they have been absolutely steamrolling. And it's not an accumulation of a bunch of 3-yard runs. It's guys averaging 4, 5, 6, 7 yards a carry. 2 different guys. So, like, to me, like, it's not particularly a modern way to run an offense. But why isn't 40, 45 carries on the table here? Like, not all for Carson Hansen, but 25 and 15. Like, that makes sense to me when your quarterback is not producing. And then, like, we saw the Mansky goal line play. We saw, for reasons, Connor Moberly coming in for a 2-point conversion. So, again, there's just some funky stuff going on there that I don't know why. And I think that some of that is by design from Iowa State, not wanting to tip their hand on what's going on behind the scenes. But, like, we can all see what happens between the lines on Saturdays, and it's not adding up to productive offense.
When Moberly sent Rocco Becht in motion on the jet motion, were you fooled in any way? Were you surprised? Did that fool you?
You know, it surprised me. I don't know that
never seen anything like it. Yeah, it was like, oh man, what is this?
And like, it's a 2-point play. Like, sometimes misdirection is your best friend there, but yeah, I don't know. Like, what was the 2-point conversion to start the game?
Yeah,
or the fake PAT. Like,
fake PAT to Bramer.
Yeah, I mean, there were. I don't want to out anybody as non-believers, but there were some people I looked at in that press box that were jaws were on the floor. Like, what in the hell was that? And I didn't ask Matt about it after the game. I should have, but my suspicion is this is a team with a 4-game losing streak. Play with nothing to lose. Play with a spark. Play with some joy. But yeah, like, find a more joyous 2-point play next time.
On another bright note, I mean, Ben Bramer coming back and scoring the first touchdown of the game. That is also, you have the Aiden Flora touchdown, but that Ben Bramer touchdown to start it off was also Hollywood-esque. I mean, who would have thought it? And when we saw questionable in the injury reports on Wednesday, we're kind of looking at each other, raising our eyebrows like, this has got to be a game, right? This has to be a joke. But no, he was ready to go.
And again, like, gutsy performance from Iowa State, gutsy performance from Ben Bramer. Like, they didn't play good football and they won the game. Like, there is something to be said for being able to do that. Like, the guys on the eastern side of the state have made a 25-year career of winning games that they shouldn't have won, and then all of a sudden that elevates a middling season to a great season. And, like, that is, I think, an interesting segue here to, I think, our next discussion, which is, what does this change your perspective or possibilities for Iowa State this season? This is the Cyclone Insider Show from the Des Moines Register. He's Eugene. I'm Travis. Eugene, I think we talked about how pretty lengthy here that the team, I think, our opinions are relatively unchanged. I do think my opinion on the season is now a little bit more up in the air, and my opinion on what's possible for this team has certainly widened and the ceiling raised. Like, 9 wins is not crazy to talk about. I wouldn't put it above 50%, but like they should beat Kansas probably, or at least it's a coin flip-ish game. They should win at Oklahoma State. You go to a bowl game and you're talking 8 or 9 wins, which if we would have said that on August 1, I think people would have been like, hell yeah. If we would have said that on October 1, people would have been like, hell no. So I think this is going to be a difficult season to try to understand, evaluate, and put in perspective. But where do you land?
It's funny because I was thinking back to our game-by-game predictions at the beginning of the season, and at the end of the day, it's a roundabout way to get to our 8-4 regular season mark. Like it's like, wow, not 8. They get to 8-4, but not in the way that we would have expected it to. But it's definitely not off the table. I feel like that the TCU game could be a game that gets either looked back as, wow, this was the spark plug, this was the catalyst that drove them forward to get them out of the dumps and spark the offense to get their stuff together, the defense and special teams to continue to play how they've been playing. Or it could just be a flash in the pan. It was a nice moment. It was a nice game. I feel like the last 2 games are certainly winnable, but a lot will rest on how much the offense is able to improve itself or fix its problems very quickly.
What if they finish 8-4? How much does that soften the disappointment? Because I don't think it undoes the disappointment. But how much do you think that softens the disappointment of going from 5-0 to being out of the Big 12 race before November starts?
I don't know if it softens it too much, but it definitely makes things a little more palatable.
Yeah. They won 11 games last year, a school record. Take that away, and you're talking about having a realistic chance to tie the school record for wins in a season, right? So, you got to have that perspective, but that doesn't mean you just forget about the fact that they were 5-0 and had a hugely manageable schedule. Cincinnati was harder than we thought. Cincinnati's a better football team than we would have thought. Colorado is a significantly worse team than we thought. A team getting blown out 50-0 at halftime, losing games just by absolute avalanches to where, is Dion coming back? Does he want to keep doing this? So that loss is worse even than it felt, at the time. I think BYU, that's a tough loss at home to a good team, right? And then Arizona State, I'm sorry, that's a bad loss. They should not have lost to Arizona State. So, the opportunity cost of the last 4 games or those 4 losses is enormous. There's no other way to look at it. Even if you don't lose to Colorado and you don't lose at home to a depleted Arizona State team, you're still in the Big 12 race here. Instead, it's how do you not crawl to the finish line? Let's limp to the finish line. So again, I think you can hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. That if they're able to pull out of this, that's admirable, meaningful, and beneficial. But they're, it's kind of creating chaos and then being being the solution there. You still did that. You're the reason that these problems exist. How much credit do you get for solving the problems that you create? And that's an overly simplistic way to say it because there are obviously other variables here from the injuries to the other teams. But I do think that that's kind of how you have to look at this. And everybody's going to come down with a different verdict and weigh all those variables differently. But to me, I usually, and we'll see where the season ends, but I usually come down on when you have opportunities, they are so fleeting. They are so not guaranteed to ever come back again. You have to take advantage of them. And that just didn't happen for Iowa State this year for a lot of different reasons. And it'll be interesting to hear Matt's take on it after the year and into spring. But to me, it's going to be hard for whatever happens the rest of the way to overshadow the opportunity cost of what was lost by some pretty poor football, pretty poorly timed.
Yeah, it'll be in the big picture, what could have been, what should have been, frankly, after a 5-0 start, and looking at the rest of the schedule or the opponents there. If you want to argue 1 or 2 losses like BYU and Cincy, like that's totally fair. But yeah, just the opportunities missed at Colorado and then blowing one at home against an Arizona State game where you were favored by 8.5 points when they were probably just as injured, probably more injured than Iowa State, and they couldn't contain Jeff Sims, who ran wild, and they were missing their key wide receiver and a couple of defensive playmakers, and you let that one get away. So 8-4, 8-5, or whatever it may be, definitely more palatable. But how can you at the end you'll be looking back at, wow, October 1, it was 5-0. Then what happened?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see too how they view it. Of like, was it an issue of not being able to handle success and expectations? Because you go back to last year when they got off to that 7-0 start, I thought they handled success really well throughout the season, even when they lost those back-to-back games. I think a lot of that was contextual. They handled success exceedingly well, but they did not have to handle expectations. There was no expectations for them heading into the year, or minimal expectations. There were expectations for this team this year, and they managed them. It seemed like, well, like, I mean, again, I'm a broken record here, but when we talked about the professionalism that they played with and operated with early in the season, I thought they handled that all very well. And then they really get punched in the mouth for the first time, and they get injured, and it just did not feel like they were able to hold the whole thing together. So I will be curious to hear from them when the year is over, probably, what their feelings were on how they handled success, how they handled expectations, and then how they handled adversity. And maybe the verdict on their end of it is we were just too banged up. We couldn't do it anymore. We could not hold the rope any longer. It wasn't about expectations. It wasn't about success. It was about two starting cornerbacks tearing their ACL and the quarterback having whatever the quarterbacks have. Maybe that's their answer. I think that's a legitimate one, but I would counter with you have to be able to absorb some level of injuries in football in this day and age, so it doesn't completely, excuse it away. But it'll be very interesting to hear their side of things when we get that opportunity, because it just feels like a huge missed opportunity. And that's it. The season is what it is at this point. And maybe 9 wins, and everybody says, "Yeah, the hell with it." They found a way. But Matt Campbell famously said, BS programs care about 6 and 6. Like, this program, for what they've done, I guess, double-edged sword, the expectations are higher. Like, winning 8 regular season games is great, but it's nothing new, and it's not what you were trying to do. And, like, again, we got to put all these pieces together, the perspective, the context, the ebbs and flows of a season. But I think you have to also acknowledge that the expectations are raised. And that's a good thing, but it also leads to disappointment a lot. This is college football. Like, more teams are disappointed than happy when the season's over.
Yeah, like I'm sure 10 years ago, people would have signed up for this type of year, but off the back or of what happened last year, you definitely come away expecting or thinking or dreaming of more. But unfortunately, this is where they're at right now, 6-4 with an opportunity to max out at 9-4 if they win their bowl game, or win out and get the regular season 8-4, possibly 8-5. So it's interesting how much expectations and what your ambitions are changes and shapes things.
Do you think that the next 2 games plus the bowl game have any bearing on next season in terms of whether it's building momentum, rebuilding confidence, setting the stage for next year, or is the team going to be too different and everything is too in flux with the transfer portal? Not to mention the coaching carousel, which we haven't talked about in weeks, but still spinning.
Yeah, to me, the coaching carousel will have the biggest variable. I feel like just with Iowa State's retention rate and just their ability to keep players, it feels like it could be a building block, or it could mostly be the same. Sure, certain pieces and people will graduate, but I feel like if Matt Campbell is not here anymore, or if he is still here, like I feel like that will have the biggest effect on what next year will look like.
Yeah, and like there's still a lot to rebuild for next year. You're talking 3 offensive linemen. Be interesting to see what they do at the wide receiver position. The secondary, kind of a mess with the injuries and, guys' decision there. But yeah, I don't think answer the question, Eugene. Like, I tend to think that this season is about this season. And when they're over, they're going to just have to flip the page, which that doesn't mean there's no carryover. But like you look back to last season, I think that was heavily influenced by the way they were able to rally back out of that hole in 2023 after that Ohio game. Whereas I just think that there's too much experience on this team. Like, if they can steady the ship, get to 8 or 9 wins, that's great. I don't know that changes my opinion on what they're going to look like in 2026.
Yeah, no, I personally think that there will be some carryover, but honestly, the biggest factor will be whether or not Campbell's still here, which I don't know how given the team's recent performance, if that changes or shifts things around, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the coaching carousel this season is going to be like generational, maybe, given the jobs that we've seen open, and I have no idea what Matt is thinking or what he wants to do, but I do think that this has the potential to look like it did at the end of 2021, where things get pretty intense simply because of the number and quality of jobs that are open. And we'll see. I mean, like, Iowa State fans have been through this for probably 8 years with Matt to varying degrees. So I don't think it's worth like getting bent out of shape or too worried about it. But it's just the truth is that this coaching carousel is unique in its scope and quality, that whatever happens, there are going to be downstream effects, and there are going to be unintended consequences that none of us can foresee. And I think that's the best way probably to look at it. Let's change gears here now and bring on Eugene's friend, my coworker, Tommy Birch, to talk about a record-setting night for Audie Crooks, scoring 43 points in a big win over Valpo. Tommy, what a night for Audie! And 43 points in 20 minutes. That's an important part of that.
Yeah, that was the most impressive part of it. And you think back to just how efficient she was, 11 of 23 from the field, 7 rebounds as well. And then you throw into the fact that she was dealing with kind of a flu bug. She had called it the Jordan flu game, because I think during the first quarter, she said she retreated back to the locker room and had to get rid of some of her pregame dinner. So all those factors really add into just one impressive performance it was by Audi Crooks, who has done this before. I mean, we forget that she had put up 40 points against Maryland during the first round of the NCAA tournament during her freshman year. So to think that she's got another one and can possibly do even more is certainly on the table and something certainly possible for her.
A lot to be impressed about from Audie's performance, but a 20 or 21-year-old knowing the legend of the flu game for Jordan there, I think heartens my heart that there's still some basketball history majors in this day and age. But you mentioned the Maryland game is really what set her on this national path. Her ability to score the ball is pretty incredible. Whatever physical advantages she had over a mid-major opponent, to be able to put the ball in the basket that many times with that kind of defensive attention, I don't know that people fully appreciate just how difficult that is, no matter the opponent. And in 20 damn minutes.
Yeah. I mean, and Addie Brown had actually joked about hey, if she would have played the whole game, I think she could have gotten 100. I don't think she
look out Wilt.
I don't think she would have gotten 100, but man, it would have been pretty cool to see just how much she could have gotten with that much playing time. And we've seen it with a lot of these non-conference games where Iowa State players really kind of teeter on the edge of doing some pretty impressive things. Audie ended up doing something impressive. breaking that single game scoring record by Tanya Burns. And I think what's pretty insane is you look at the amount of players and some of the talent that has come through Iowa State women's basketball program over the years between Audie Crooks and Tanya Burns. No, those players were able to do it. You're talking about, Stacey Freeze, Ashley Jones, Bridget Carlton, some of the most prolific scorers in school history couldn't accomplish this feat, but Audie Crooks did. And I think when it's all said and done, like, she is going to own a lot of the Iowa State record book. And right now she already does have a hefty amount of records to her name.
Eugene, what do you got for Birchie?
The man's ready to go. I mean, he's touched on it all.
Tommy, I think, I am always hesitant to get too amped up or too pessimistic about a team in the middle of November. But I think it's inarguable that, whatever expectations there have been, even optimistic expectations for Audie for this team, they're surpassing. Where do you feel like they are as a group right now?
Yeah, last night probably wasn't even the best judge of town when it comes to what this team can do. I would say during the first 3 games, they looked magnificent. And I think that's another layer to what Audie did last night and just how impressive it was that the entire team pretty much outside of Crooks and kind of Addie Brown too just did not shoot it well. And Audie carried this team. But I think that's going to be the biggest difference in this year and last year where, you were counting on it so many times where it had to be Audie, it had to be Addie. And if either of those two had an off night, Iowa State was going to be in some big-time trouble. But they've got those two coming back. Jada Williams can be a go-to player. Sydney Harris is a valuable option off the bench. Kenzie Hare has already turned in a nice start to the season as well. So you've got a long list of possible scorers on this team. But I think probably the most impressive part of what we've seen early during the start of the season is just how much more they're willing to defend. Look, they aren't going to be like the men's team. They aren't going to be pressing. They aren't going to be just throwing the kitchen sink at you from that side of the ball. But they brought in some much scrappier players that are going to get after and defend the ball really well. And, Jada Williams is a player like that, EP, Kenzie Hare, now that she's healthy. And I think when you go back and you look at how last season went, even though Iowa State had 4-0 start to last season, it really felt like when you went back and looked at some of those games, you could kind of see, okay, there were some weaknesses there. There were some weaknesses here. There might be a limited ability to Iowa State to be able to accomplish this and that. But you look at this year's team and just how well-rounded they are and the amount of different things that they can do and the amount of talent they have and the depth there, it makes Iowa State a pretty impressive team so far. Now, like you said, it's early in the year. They haven't played anybody truly tough. But the good news is who they have played, they've looked really, really well so far.
Was last night and Audie Crooks' 43 points, is that the Audie Crooks that we've seen have dominant performances? You mentioned Maryland throughout her career, or are we seeing another step in her at least as a scorer and offensive player?
Yeah, I don't know if we're quite at that level yet, just because you look at it was Valparaiso, so she's not going to face teams like that all season. There was an obvious mismatch there where Valpo didn't have the size, strength, or athleticism to really deal with Audie. And plus, they did something that not many teams end up doing against Audie Crooks, and that's just go one-on-one with her. And that left her wide open for so many layups.
I don't think that'll be a strategy quickly adopted after last night.
No, and we've seen some other teams try it and kind of take the approach of okay, we're going to let Audie get her baskets, but we're not going to let anybody else do it. If Iowa State is going to beat us, somebody else is going to have to step up to the plate, and the Cyclones are going to have to knock down some shots. But what this team has already showed you is they have that ability to have other people step up. They have that ability to get scoring from other people. So Look, I'm not saying you're not going to see another 40-point game from Audie Crooks at some point. She does have a knack for really being able to step up in a big moment where Iowa State has really needed her. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 45, 50-point performance at some point in her career. Maybe it's next year during another non-conference game. But to expect this type of performance, you're just not going to get it every night. But look, she's average. She entered the game averaging like 23.3 points per game. So she's off to a really good start. And I don't know how much more that's going to dip down. The only reason why it might dip down is just because Iowa State has all those other options for scoring when it comes to Addie Brown, Jada Williams, and the other players that I mentioned as well.
What's next for this team? I know they got Drake next week. I think they play Sunday as well. But like, what are you looking for as I think you have to start looking at that ramp up, right? Like you get these early games, let's figure out who we are. And then you start to try to hone that identity. Like what's the path ahead for them?
Yeah, I mean, to me, the first real test for the Iowa State women is probably going to be when they end up posting Iowa names. I think Iowa State's going to be the favorite there, not just because they're the home team, but they're more experienced. They have that mismatch, even with a really good Big Ten team with Audie Crooks. But the difference this year is like, man, last year they had such a daunting schedule where early on, you have not only the in-state opponents of Drake, UNI, and Iowa, but yet South Carolina. And you had UConn. Iowa State, at least this year, has been able to ease into things a little bit more, build that confidence, figure out who they are. Because, look, there is a lot that they had to figure out between ushering in a new point guard, bringing back Kenzie Harris finally healthy, and kind of figuring out where some of those new players fit into things. But so far, it's been a good path for Iowa State. But it's pretty much going to be smooth sailing for a little bit longer here. Even with the Drake game coming up, that's going to be a complete mismatch for Iowa State in a game that they should probably dominate there. But look, we in-state matchups are always weird, so maybe something weird, something odd could happen, but it should be a game that Iowa State once again wins by double digits at least.
He's Tommy Birch. He covers the Iowa State women's basketball program for the Des Moines Register. Be sure to follow him for all your Audi Crooks and Iowa State women's coverage on what looks like it could be a really promising winter for the Cyclone women. Birchie, thanks for coming on with us.
Yeah, good to see you, Eugene.
This is the Cyclone Insider Show from the Des Moines Register. He's Eugene. I'm Travis. We're going to finish up here quickly with this is where we are in the season where Iowa State men's basketball beaten the stuffing. We'll go seasonal here. Stuffing out of an SEC team on a quote-unquote neutral floor that was a home game for Iowa State is going to get about 5 minutes of discussion here. But I thought that was a really complete performance in Sioux Falls, Eugene, and one that, again, you don't want to get overly optimistic, but Josh Jefferson barely played in the first half. Milan Momcilovic gave them basically nothing offensively, and they were up by, 25, ended up winning by 16, almost scored 100 points despite going 5 of 20-something from 3. Like, Killian Toure looks like the real deal. Jamarian Bateman had a big game. Blake Buchanan had what TJ said was maybe one of their best games from a center in 4+ years. Like, again, not booking my Final Four hotels, but really impressive evening at the Pentagon on Monday for them.
Yeah, impossible to come away from that and not feel really good about this team. Just offensively, having that kind of performance in the paint, on the glass, they were crushing it, and they got beat early on the boards in the first 4 minutes of the match, but then after that, really settled in. Blake Buchanan, as you mentioned, was impressive. Dom Plata even came in and had a couple of impressive putbacks. Just everybody from top to bottom. I mean, Taman Lipsey dropped a career high, 25 points. And then defensively, you forced 26 turnovers against a team that typically has a good turnover rate.
That was the most turnovers, tied for the most turnovers in Mississippi State program history.
There you go. Josh Hubbard didn't have a single turnover in his last game, and now he comes out and chokes it up 7 times. Like, everything that Iowa State did in that game on a quote-unquote neutral floor just looked impressive. And it's one thing when they do it against FDU and Grambling State, but to do that against an NCAA tournament type of team, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah, they play Monday against something called Stonehill, I believe.
Stonehill University.
Yeah, I think they got a basketball team apparently, and then they head to Vegas for 2 really good games we know of, and a third that we anticipate will be really good. St. John's and then Creighton. That I am really excited to watch them play basketball against those teams because they're going to romp on Monday night, and then what does the offense look like against a St. John's team that gave up 100 to who'd they give up 100 to the other day? Bama, which that's a Nate Oates offense. They're probably not putting up 100. Nate Oates and TJ are best buds, the Whitewater guys there. But it's that's going to be interesting. How much different do they look against Creighton than the team that was in the exhibition in Omaha a month ago? I am as excited from a discovery standpoint, I think, heading into Vegas as I have for an MTE in a long time. Last year, I was really interested to see how that team would match up in Maui, but we already had it. We knew that team was good, right? It was how good could they be? That was what we were trying to figure out. I don't know how good this team could be, but I'm beginning to think that the ceiling is probably a little higher than I anticipated. If Taman's going to go out and be capable of scoring 25 points, that's huge for Iowa State. I know that's not really what we're talking about as much because we know Taman's a good basketball player, but if he's able to score 25 points, teams are going to have to account for that. And if they have to account for that, then they're not accounting for Josh Jefferson in the short roll. They're not accounting for Nealon in the corner. They're not accounting for Killian Torrey and Jamarian Bateman and Dom Nelson cutting to the basket. So again, not to get too optimistic or get out in front of your skis, there is a lot of possibility, I think, for this basketball team. And I think the 3 games in Vegas are going to be really interesting because they could also play good basketball and lose. St. John's, for whatever Alabama did to them, is still good. Creighton is very good. The third team I'm going to anticipate is pretty good as well. So they could go out there and play good basketball and still lose. To me, it's going to be less about the win-loss than it is of how do they look on consecutive days against high major opponents and how do they handle when something gets taken away from them? Because Mississippi State really didn't take much away from them. I'm guessing one of St. John's or Creighton will try to do that. And if they're able to, what's the counterpunch? And that to me is the exciting part about this Iowa State team is that it seems like they have lots of counterpunches.
Yeah, just from how deep of the rotation that they run and just their ability to problem solve when the 3-point shot wasn't dropping, they were still able to put up 96 points and contain a Josh Hubbard-led offense that had been playing pretty well up to that point. But those 3 games in Vegas will definitely be super telling. I can't wait for that as well. Just going up against top 25 ranked teams. And that third game, even though we don't know who it'll be, you look at the rest of the field or the rest of the teams that will also be in Vegas, that will be another headliner. And that could even be a 5th place game for all we know. It's crazy how stacked that tournament will be and just the opportunities in front of Iowa State.
He's Eugene. I'm Travis. We work for the Des Moines Register. This is the Cyclone Insider Show. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we will catch you next time.